Hey everybody, welcome back to Conscientious Omnivore. My name is Pal. We're doing a live stream. I think we got a couple people on. Let me just check real quick. Okay, I think I'm live. Let's see. I think one person is watching. Let's see if anybody's going to be in. I'm going to be doing something new today. I figured I would do some news items for you guys that are related to veganism and some interesting things happening around the world in the recent past. So I just wanted to kind of share this with you guys and do a quick live stream before heading off to bed for the day. If anybody's in the chat, I think there's quite a few people joining now. If somebody could just say if the audio is okay and you guys can hear me okay, because I won't have a guest on today, so I just didn't have anybody to check with. Let's see. Give it a second here. Cool. Hey, Jennerly. All right, so I think I'll start. Thanks everybody who's joined already, and for anybody else, yeah, I guess you can catch up or watch after. Hey, Duke. Cool. Hi, Kathy. It's great to have you guys on. All right. I just figured, I've been actually meaning to do this for a while. I get a lot of interesting articles and things that I read, especially from Twitter. If anybody's not on Twitter and or is on Twitter but doesn't follow me, check out my my Twitter page. It's just C Omnivore, so like Conscientious Omnivore, but just the letter C and then Omnivore. I do share stuff there as well, and then I just think it's an easy way to comment quickly on stories and things like that. But for like weeks now, I've been saving a lot of the more interesting articles that I've seen, and just had them on my phone kind of like for a long time. And some of them aren't really topical anymore. They're not as relevant as they were weeks ago. But I hope to be able to do something like this maybe once a week or every other week, and just go through some of the interesting articles. So I saved some of the kind of more, unique ones, and just wanted to run through those with you guys. And I'll share my screen and kind of take you through some of the interesting bits that I found, and then kind of just give my take on them, and try not to get too depressed in the process, because I know, some of these things are pretty depressing, but yeah, I'll try to save some good stuff for the end as well. So yeah, I guess without any further ado, let me share my screen. Here we go. And you guys should hopefully be able to see it now. So first and foremost, there's a pretty sad story. This was kind of earlier in the summer. This was from June, actually, so it's a bit of an old story, but I just wanted to talk about it a little bit because I think, I don't know if anybody follows Foot Soldier's channel, but he's done quite a few good videos about the RSPCA in the UK, as well as the, I think Joey Carpstrong did some videos about them as well. And this article, for me, when I first read this, it really kind of struck a chord with how ridiculous, these kind of humane and, all these kind of like accreditations that farms get that try to, convince people that they're doing okay, and that, you can buy it's like the same thing with the red tractor and all this kind of other stuff. Like in the US, you got like your Whole Foods, like humane farming, levels and all this kind of stuff that people try to get assured that what they're buying is going to be okay. And there was this story about a farm in the UK in Bristol where they just had like hundreds and hundreds of like dead animals piled up. They were literally like just in piles and in various states of decomposing, and you had the other animals who were like basically starving and trying to cannibalize the corpses and all this kind of stuff. And it's a horrible story. I'm not going to go through it because it has very graphic pictures, and I think for anybody who's vegan, it's like, you see enough of this stuff, like you don't want to see it all the time. So I'm not going to scroll down here. I just want to leave the the title up and then just talk about something that they talk about in the article, because this in and of itself wasn't the shocking part to me. It's like we all know, if you look at any kind of news, that this is actually very commonplace, and you probably just see all sorts of abuses in most farms. And I think the part that got me the most out of this story was that this farm had already been investigated by the RSPCA back in 2015, and they got like fined. They brought in veterinarians. They brought in like police. They did like an investigation. They gave the farm like a whole list of stuff that they needed to fix. There were all sorts of problems already. So that was back in 2015. And then in 2016, they basically went back and they found the farm had violated even more stuff, and they had done even more like wrong, kind of like violations. And then finally, of course, they got shut down. But like a whole year goes by, there isn't anything like happening in between. They're not like checking up on them, and then they go back and just find like even more like horrific abuses. It's just this kind of stuff just like kills me, that like you have like somebody who's clearly a bad actor. Even anybody who's not even vegan would see this and think like that's upsetting. Like these are horrifically like terrible conditions that like even somebody who believes or wants to believe in the humane meat myth, they wouldn't want to see this. And they get fined and they get kind of told to fix it, and then they don't do anything for a year. In fact, it gets worse, and then it took a whole year before they went back and like kind of found out that that's happening. So just crazy story. I didn't really want to show the pictures, but if anybody wants to read through the article, I'll have all the links that I'm going to go through posted kind of at the end or whatever. I'll put it in a comment, so if anybody wants to read through that. But I just thought that was very sad, and goes to show you like how much you can trust in these organizations. I certainly don't have any faith in them. Next one, this was just a kind of a lead into the next article, really. This came out in May as well, so this is kind of an old story as well. But the news about processed meat causing cancer, that's not new. The World Health Organization has been kind of on record since I think 2015, if I remember right, is when they first made the recommendation. But slowly but surely, there's more and more organizations, health organizations throughout the world that are kind of taking on the message and trying to get it across to people that there is no amount of the processed meat that is safe. Whenever these kind of recommendations came out, back in 2015 and later, you saw kind of like everybody jumping through like a million hoops to try to basically explain to people like, no, it's all right. If you just have it every once in a while, and moderation and all this kind of stuff, and just trying to get people to think that it's not that big a deal to be eating bacon and sausages and ham and, cold cuts, like deli meats or whatever. And really, this article just highlights that, yes, it is. And there is no level that is considered safe. There is no amount that is good. And the interesting part here is they also talked about alcohol. And I'm going to bring up another article in a little bit that talks about that as well. And I just want to say a few things about this article, which, they go through that there's this World Cancer Research Fund where they are trying to post guidelines to people to basically, you can see it here. The respected global authority has unveiled a 10-point plan to cut your risk of getting cancer by up to 40%. So they make a whole bunch of like recommendations for people, like, don't be overweight, be physically active, don't be drinking like sugary drinks and all this kind of stuff. And they're telling you that basically like you should, it's basically saying avoid all like processed meats. So, there is no safe level. And, they're literally saying UK experts have disagreed with the draconian advice, insisting the odd bacon sandwich isn't anything to worry about. They're saying, yes, it is. Even every once in a while is still bad for you, and it's still contributing to your risk of getting cancer, and there is no safe amount. They're also saying that this applies to alcohol. And they're saying that, stomach cancer is another thing that, is increased chance from the consumption of these products. So there, it's an interesting little read. Go through that, and then the last point on this article that I wanted to talk about was where is it here? Yeah, the best advice is to not eat processed meat. The risk does increase with consumption. So basically, they're just saying like, yeah, there's no safe amount, and they are telling you that just don't eat it. And again, for everybody, processed meat is not just these deli meats or whatever. It's also anything that's like cured, smoked. So your ham, your sausages, all these kinds of things are known carcinogens, and they should be avoided. And then the part that I last wanted to point out was that Cancer Research UK said cutting out booze and processed meats altogether was not needed, and they just try to minimize the impact or the statement of this other body by basically saying that here they're trying to slide it. A bacon buddy or a glass of wine every so often isn't anything to worry about. It's the things you do every day that matter most. So they're just trying to take this down a notch and be like, oh yeah, it's fine if you just do it every once in a while. And it's like they're clearly not listening, and they're not getting the message from this other body, this other health organization that's basically saying like, yeah, you should not eat it. There is no safe amount. So I just thought that was interesting. And then there's this other article which is about alcohol specifically. This one's pretty recent. I read this about a week ago when this came out. And they did a huge global study. This was done in like 190-something countries, 195 countries. And what they did was they looked at alcohol consumption between 1990 and 2016. So this is a long-running study. They looked at data from 15 to 95 years old people, and they found that basically there is no safe limit for alcohol. Every bit that you drink does contribute to an increased risk of cancer. And they looked at all sorts of kind of things. They in the past, people have said that there's a mildly protective aspect of drinking alcohol. Alcohol consumption would reduce your risk of heart disease. And there's different theories about that. And if you watch some of Dr. Greger's videos on nutritionfacts.org, there's some interesting stuff where he talks about the polyphenols. Those are the antioxidants in red wine. You can basically get all the benefits of that by just drinking grape juice or eating grapes or eating things that are like the dark blue, color that you see in grapes. So things like blueberries and other things like currants and stuff like that. And basically, again, this study is very clear and very explicit that there is no safe level. They're saying one drink a day does represent a small increased risk, and people are not just drinking one drink a day usually. So they talk about different countries and where they ranked, and it's very striking. So. And I think the UK for women was actually quite high. I don't remember if they were number 1 or whatever, but they were very high up there. Let's see. Oh, they were number 8. Sorry, yeah. So British women drink an average of 3 drinks a day and rank 8th in the world of highest drinkers. So you can see this is quite kind of scary stuff. If you look at like Ukraine, for example, the average for women is over 4 drinks a day. Sweden is up there at 3. Denmark is over 3 as well. Ireland, Andorra, Luxembourg, these are all over 3, closer to 3.5. Germany's pretty high. Switzerland and the UK is up there, like they said, number 8. And British men also ranked, pretty high, but not nearly as high as the women, but not because they drank less. They actually, also drank 3 drinks a day. It's just that the men ranking was actually just way worse for the other countries. So they show that British men were 62nd out of the 195 countries surveyed. But if you look, like the Romanians were over 8 drinks a day average. That's just like shocking. I mean, I can't even believe this. It's like ridiculous. Hungary is very bad too. I live in Hungary, and for anybody who's watching and is new to the channel, and I can confirm there's a lot of alcoholism, sadly. And so that's just very sad. So I guess what are we, 10th? Yeah, in Hungary. So just very, very crazy statistics. And yeah, just thought I would share this because I think this is something that is not known by a lot of people. But this study was very, very comprehensive. They looked at all sorts of kind of impacts of drinking to your health, and what they said was that the small benefit you get in the reduction of coronary disease is far outweighed by the other negative aspects, stomach cancer, throat cancer, all sorts of other problems. And they literally just said, like, yeah, there is no safe level of drinking when it comes to your health. And then here again, I wanted to point out that just like in the last article, there is a immediate kind of like response and reaction by people trying to basically just like negate the the message here. So what this guy is Professor David Spiegelhalter, who is a professor for the public understanding of risk at the University of Cambridge. He sounded a note of caution about the findings. Given the pleasure presumably associated with moderate drinking, claiming there is no safe level does not seem an argument for abstention, he said. There is no safe level of driving, but the government does not recommend that people avoid driving. Come to think of it, there's no safe level of living, but nobody would recommend abstention. So I think this guy, he's trying to be funny and just basically say like, oh, don't be so like, quick to stop boozing. And it's like, yeah, I mean, if you care about your health, you want to know what the science says. The science says don't drink because it's clearly not good for you. And this is a pretty, large study and just, goes through a lot of stuff. So, just thought that was interesting. Check that out if anybody's kind of on the fence. I recently made kind of a decision that I'm no longer going to be drinking anymore. I haven't been a heavy drinker for quite a while, so for me this is not really a big deal. And this article didn't really push me in that direction because I had already pretty much made up my mind about it. But just like I say, there's a lot of alcoholism around, and definitely not something to be caught up in. I don't think I've ever had a problem with it, but certainly it's something that's bad for your health, and if it can be avoided, and it can easily, why not? And I find that like as I get older, I find it less and less enjoyable anyway, and I just find that I feel the physical effects of it a lot easier. So even if I'm not drunk, but just having like 2 or 3 beers the next day, like I feel my joints and stuff. So like I think even if you're not really consuming a lot of alcohol, you can definitely feel negative health effects from it. So yeah, check out that article if anybody's interested. This next one, bringing it back to more of a animal situation and talking about the plight of the animals that we eat. This article was pretty crazy. I read this. This was about Spain specifically, and there are figures that show that they have now more pigs in the country than people. So this is just like crazy when you think about it. This is kind of like how they say, if you look at like in the US, for example, the farm animals produce more waste than like all the people in the whole country. This is a simple case where you can just see that just the pigs alone outnumber the humans. So you can imagine like factor in all the other animals that get consumed there, and you can very easily see that this is just a crazy situation. And it's there's a lot of like people fearing for the environmental impact because obviously this is a huge strain, water usage, the waste that comes from these animals, all this kind of stuff. And then the only other interesting thing about this article was that they're really talking about it more from like a economical and environmental view, but just think of the, like, if you want to think of like the from the animal's perspective, just think of the numbers of those poor animals that are getting killed every year. It's like more than the whole population of the entire country, and they're probably getting killed in less than a year. So it's like it's just a crazy figure. And then they go into like how much water these pigs are taking and all this kind of stuff. And the other interesting thing that was discussed here is they have a special like I guess famous type of pig that gets raised there. Here it is. It's called Jamón Ibérico de Bellota. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly. Hopefully, these pigs are basically prized because the end of their lives, they basically get to roam around in these oak forests, and they eat the acorns, and supposedly, you know, the meat gets, you know, gets to be more tasty because of that. And then they basically have a special curing process where they're you know, it takes 36 months, it says here, minimum 36 months. And so there's this special curing process, and then, you know, it's like super ridiculously expensive. It goes for like hundreds of euros a kilo, it says. And this article talks a lot about how what's happening is that there's fraud cases of this, you know, of lots of like pig meat being sold as this hamon stuff that when it's actually not. Because they have no way to actually meet the demand for it. The supply is far outstripped by the demand, and as more and more people, like in, you know, other parts of Europe and the rest of the world, like try to buy this stuff, they just basically have to forge the stuff to make it look like they have it, and then people are getting ripped off. And my point about this article is really just that, like, you know, if you look at kind of like the way people are, they don't want to believe the truth. Like, you know, you look at the first article I talked about, you know, you have people who are paying money for these, you know, accreditations that farms get, because they want to believe that the farms are like treating their animals humanely and all this kind of stuff. And even when you have these abuse cases that come to light seemingly every day or every week at least, they don't want to believe it. And you know, you go to the World Health Organization's announcement about cancer and these other researches that have been done about alcohol consumption, people don't want to believe it. And then you look at this, like, you know, people don't want to believe that, like, they're getting ripped off, but they are, because everyone just thinks like, oh, well, you know, it's like, I'm paying all this extra money, it's got to be legit. And it's totally not. And they're pretty much destroying the world to make it. So it's pretty crazy. This is a interesting article that I found. I believe this is a Indian website, chooseveg.in. So I believe this is an Indian website. They were talking about the number of animals being slaughtered, and this is actually quite surprising to a lot of people, I think. There's a report, it says, by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which shows that India has risen to the top of the table as the world's largest beef exporter. And they basically say, yeah, that India displaced Brazil in 2014. So this is just a really crazy thing, because everyone thinks of India as being like vegetarians and, you know, no, like, you know, killing of cows, especially because there's a lot of religious, you know, belief there that, that, you know, they're sacred animals. So it's just very interesting. And they basically say that in 2015, there is a report that they surpassed 13 lakh tons of beef exports. I didn't know what this meant. I looked it up, and apparently this word lakh, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, is the Indian unit of measure to say 100,000. So if you read this, what you're actually seeing is that that is 13 100,000 tons. So what is that? That's 1.3 million tons of beef exports. And then in 2016, that rose to 1.8 million tons. So it's just an insane figure. And then they basically also talk about how, what did they say? They said, look at how many animals this equates to roughly, because they said they get about 200 kilograms of meat from one animal. So they're basically saying that 18 lakh tons would require the slaughter of about 90 lakh ton animals. So what that means is that is 90 times 100,000. So that's 9 million. So that's 9 million animals that are getting killed just in that 1 year. And these are cows. They're also saying that that's just for the exports, and they're also saying that India is ranked 7th in domestic consumption. So what's happening is they're exporting 9 million animals, or killing them and then exporting their meat, but then it doesn't even account for the ones that are being eaten, you know, and consumed within the country. So that's pretty crazy too. And then, yeah, like they're just talking about how a lot of these are actually from water buffalo. This is, they call this what kind of cara beef. So these are, you know, water buffaloes that are being kept for milk production. And then basically, again, in the dairy industry, within 5 to 6 years, they become spent or unproductive and are sent for slaughter. And this is pretty much in line with, all the other dairies throughout the world, large-scale dairies. They basically just impregnate the cows over and over again. And instead of having their natural lifespan, which is 20 to 25 years, they're spent after 5 years, and then they're killed. So this is actually quite sad, and I just wanted to highlight this because this was from an Indian site, and this was actually a little bit surprising to me that these numbers were quite so high, and I had no idea that they were the largest beef exporter in the world. So that's actually quite surprising. I have read other articles previously talking about India and the myth that it's a vegetarian country. There are a lot of vegetarian people there, but there are also a lot of people there who eat a lot of meat, and in fact even beef, as this article shows. So that's an interesting one. Yeah, this was the lacton thing. Okay, and then this was just a quick story that I wanted to show that. This was a story about animal rights activists who were demonstrating in Santorini. Santorini is kind of, I guess, famous for having these long, kind of like steps that go up to the beautiful lookout places and stuff. And what they have is they have donkeys that bring up tourists on their back, obviously. Not of their own free will. And what's happening is that as people are getting more and more obese, these animals are actually having more and more of a tough time bringing up these really, heavy-set people, and they're getting all sorts of health problems. And so this was a demonstration. I think it was by Direct Action. I can't remember from the article, but anyway. Oh yeah, it was Direct Action. Yeah. And they were attacked by the people who are some of these tour guides who bring up the people and, rent out the donkeys. So they literally attacked the peaceful demonstration, basically just telling people, hey, don't ride the donkeys, like walk up yourself. And, if you think about this, it's like, it really just shows the kind of the irony, like we're eating too many animal products, we're getting too fat, and then we can't even walk up the hill, so we like abuse animals to get us up to the top of the hill. It's like, I don't know, like it's just so crazy. But anyway, that was a pretty weird story. Next, kind of in the same line of the animal agriculture industry defending itself, this was an interesting article that I read. This was about a month ago. Don't know if anybody had seen this, but there was a story about the company called WeWork. They made an announcement that they basically had a new company policy, and it says, meat is no longer permitted at work-related events. That's kind of in line with some of the developments that have been happening, like at the UN and some of the governmental agencies in countries. I think there was like something similar in Germany, or like, I can't remember. I think it was Germany, where they also did like any work official, meeting, like they had to have like meatless dishes or something like that. But anyway, in an effort to be more like environmentally conscious, this company underwent this change in their corporate policy, and employees were no longer able to expense meals containing meat. And the company's founder emphasized that their calculations show that with just these simple changes, they're going to be able to save 16.7 billion gallons of water, 445 million pounds of carbon dioxide emissions, and more than 15 million animals by the year 2023. So that's actually not very long. That's 5 years to save that amount of water and animals and CO2 emissions, and that's just from 6,000 people at that company. So there's obviously a lot of people that hope that other companies follow suit and kind of start getting people to change this way, and kind of like, you can go on a business trip and still buy that steak, but don't think you're going to be able to expense it anymore. So I think that's actually very reasonable, and the meat industry obviously doesn't. So what they did was, in response to this, the North American Meat Institute rolled out a new website called ichoosemeat.com. And I kid you not, if you go to that website, you will see that it's full of like pro-meat propaganda. And they are basically trying to teach, people who might be upset by this, like false, kind of like stats that show that, the animal agriculture industry is not harmful to the environment and all this kind of stuff. And anyway, this article debunks the claims made on that website pretty well, and they show actual, kind of stats and explanations about where they're kind of bamboozling people. So this is a pretty fun read if anybody wants to see it. They say it's a hilarious, guide, but I actually don't find this kind of stuff funny because I think it's just straight up like malicious, propaganda and lies, but whatever. And again, going to the next story here, this follows suit for the whole thing that, the meat and animal agriculture industries are very powerful. They have huge influence. And I don't know if anybody has seen this, but the official Cowspiracy Facebook page was taken down back in the end of June. And since then, it has still been down. And as far as this story from a couple days ago, it was still down. And the Cowspiracy page has this official kind of post about it and talking about what they think, is happening. And the thing that they've come to kind of like say is that, they've appealed it. The case was closed. They're not getting any responses. Like Facebook is simply not responding to their, inquiries, and they are not getting their page undeleted and returned. And they're basically saying that they had a violation, but they give no specifics of what rules they may have violated. And there's a lot of other websites Facebook pages that have been shut down as well. And they are basically saying that if you look at them, a lot of them are about kind of like activism. And, there's probably some kind of broad brush that's being, kind of like, put against all these like activist websites that, that go against corporate interests. So this is just a very interesting story, and definitely something that I think seems reasonable. They give a lot of, kind of like examples of where these kinds of things have happened in the past and obtained through Freedom of Information Act requests, where they have been able to show that, Big Ag, it says, and other animal industry groups have subsequently exploited this preposterous designation to marginalize animal activists whenever possible. So they're basically trying to use the FBI's classification of animal rights and environmental movements as the #1 domestic terror threat in the United States. So again, very interesting stuff, and just really goes to show you some of the lengths that these companies are willing to go to basically, discredit the vegan movement or environmental movement, or really any kind of like activist movement that goes against corporate interests. So yeah, just very interesting. I definitely recommend everybody read through this and really see, kind of like where, these massive media outlets are actually kind of, because let's face it, Facebook really is a media outlet now, where they are basically doing the will and bidding of animal agriculture. Next, we are on to a story on Business Insider, where they talked about a report from one of the biggest banks. I think it's HSBC, if I remember right. It's HSBC. And they were talking about the Earth Overshoot Day, which, if anybody hasn't seen that, it's basically a calculation that shows when we as a planet have used up the resources that can be renewed within 1 year. And, ideally, you would want it to be less than, you wouldn't want to use all the renewable resources at all, but at the very least, you would want to, have that be at the end of the year. So you would use up your whole kind of budget at the end of the year, not, earlier. And what's happened is that since they've started measuring this, I think this was from like back in the 70s or something. I can't remember when the first one was. They said back, here we go. In 1970, we overshot Earth's resource budget by only 2 days. Overshoot day fell on December 29th, and that date has been pushed up by 5 months. So now it's in August, and it's just really crazy. And when you look at, kind of the environmental impact that this is having all over the world, they're talking about the wildfires in Scandinavia. We actually have some friends. My wife has a really good friend of hers that she's living in Finland now. And they were talking about the record heat and all this kind of stuff. Like it's very real. Like people are starting to see the impact now, and yeah, it's just undeniable that there's like kind of extreme weather happening, and these events are getting more and more likely to happen. And that's what this report is saying basically as well. So this is just a financial institution. They're talking about kind of the ability of governments and large companies to be able to deal with the increase in temperatures and the impact to the environment. So they're talking about the temperatures by 2100 could be up to 15% higher than the highest projections from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So it's just scary stuff. Like, read through this, but basically it's just saying that, like, yeah, like, even banks are starting now to look at this stuff seriously, and they're not doing it for any altruistic or any kind of like activist kind of reasons. They're just simply looking at it from a financial impact, and this is kind of unique because most of these large corporations haven't been willing to put out any kind of statements on this kind of stuff. And so they're saying that this is kind of unique from HSBC. And yeah, it says the companies and governments are not adequately prepared for climate effects. So it's just kind of scary stuff. Moving on, we got another story here that is pretty interesting, again, showing the corporate interest with the UK looking like they're going to go through with the Brexit and leaving the European Union. There is quite a bit of fear that some of the stricter kind of like animal protection and animal product quality designations, they would be getting more lax after the Brexit happening. And this article talks about how Australia is actively lobbying right now to basically be allowed to bring in products that they are right now under EU law banned from bringing in. So they are talking about like technical barriers, but what that really comes down to is that they want to export animals that are hormone treated beef and low quality things like burnt goat heads and other stuff like that that's considered waste product right now, and that those are not allowed into the UK at the moment. So yeah, just kind of crazy stuff. And they're talking about how if the Brexit goes through, some of these things may be relaxed, and people might be flooded with kind of these low quality animal products and things that have like growth hormone added and all this kind of stuff. So long story short is, even the rules that they have now, you can see like how well they're enforced by the first story I referenced, and then you can only imagine how bad things might get if they're relaxed even further. So I don't think that that is a very good idea. And I want to end on some kind of more positive news, because hopefully I don't want everybody to think that it's all bad out there. A lot of these things can be improved by more and more people going vegan. And I wanted to share this very positive little story that I read about. This was actually a few weeks ago, earlier this summer as well, in July. This lady is a 53-year-old vegan runner, and she has set a record for a huge endurance run. It's 310 miles. She completed the California Muir Ramble Route, which is 310 miles over 7 days, 9 hours and 49 minutes. And yeah, she was going along with some friends who were helping pace her, and she had her little dog with her. And she's got an Instagram page, I guess, if anybody's on there and you want to check her out. Her name is, what is her name? Katra Corbett. So check her out. And she, had set a course record for this race. Pretty cool. She sustained herself with energy gels, avocados, natural vegan bars, and almond butter packs. And yeah, they make a note that she ran in vegan trail running shoes made by Hoka One. So that was pretty cool. And not only is that pretty crazy in and of itself, but she actually did this 4 days after completing another 150-mile trail race. So just very impressive. This lady's kind of pretty amazing, I would say. And, just from looking at her, obviously, like, it's kind of hard to tell from just one picture, but like in my mind, she does not look to be like a typical 53-year-old person. So she looks quite young, and she's been vegan for a long time. It says, yeah, she's went vegan 24 years ago as a way to combat her drug and alcohol addiction. And Corbett has run an impressive 250 ultra marathons of varying distances. So this is really cool. I don't know if Logan's watching or anything, but I just thought that would be kind of like another good source of inspiration. Like, A, we're not too old, and B, like there's quite a few people who are doing very well, you know, even into their 50s, obviously setting records and stuff. So this was very cool. And especially kind of interesting, it says here, she says, now sober, she adheres to a raw vegan diet and overwhelmingly positive attitude, riding that endless runner's high. So again, check that out for some positive news. I thought this was actually quite interesting and fun to read about, and just kind of shows you that, like, yeah, you know, you're not going to whittle away and waste away as a vegan. Sorry, you know, Sverige and all these other guys out there saying go vegan and die. You're absolutely wrong. This lady's obviously thriving even 24 years after adopting a vegan diet. Next, and I think last, yes, this is the last one I got for you guys. This was an interesting New York Times article about one of the doctors who is kind of like hailed as one of the main people behind vitamin D recommendations. It is an endocrinologist. What is this guy's name? Michael Hollick. And basically this article kind of starts painting a picture of the fact that he is a person who's benefited to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars from the various testing industries and supplement industries, basically pushing a message about how important vitamin D consumption is. And they go through and kind of like talk about, you know, the rise in this business. They're basically saying that supplement sales have been pushed to $936 million in 2017. So again, this is almost $1 billion in just 2017. And it's saying that that's a 9-fold increase over the previous decade. They're talking about the lab tests. Doctors ordered more than 10 million for Medicare patients in 2016, up 547% since, so, you know, that's 5 times as much since 2007, and at a cost of $365 million, again, going out of Medicare. So just kind of crazy stuff, and really kind of highlights the fact that, you know, the bias that is out there in the world about nutrition is not just necessarily about, you know, meat eating or vegan diets. It can be about anything, and including vitamin D. And yeah, basically, I think this is a very interesting read. I would recommend this to everybody. And then after you read this, go and check out Dr. John Mcdougall's stance on vitamin D. And I think he's probably going to feel vindicated after reading this. I actually got this article from his Twitter post. He shared it out, and I remember, like, you know, probably maybe 2 years ago, watching some of his stuff about vitamin D, and it's one of the reasons why I chose not to supplement vitamin D personally. So the only vitamin that I do supplement is vitamin B12, and I've talked about that in some other videos before, but yeah, I don't do D. I think I get enough vitamin D just from, you know, basically being outside, and I think this this article does a pretty good job of calling into question some of the, you know, science that that gets thrown around about the vitamin D recommendations. I would definitely recommend people check out Dr. Mcdougall's you know, stance on vitamin D, and then make your you know, make your own decision based on that. So yeah, that's all I got. Let me stop sharing my screen here. I'm going to go back and hopefully see what the chat has been up to. I'm going to scroll back, hopefully read through what everybody said. I'm reading Mighty Duke's comment back about the driving not being good for you. Yeah, that was a good comment. I thought that was like the worst part of it. Generally says, saw a clip tonight for a Spanish film, Empathy, which mentioned the pig-to-person ratio. Yeah, that's a crazy thing. Hey, Leon. He says hi. Kathy says hi. Yeah, the poor donkeys in Santorini. Yeah, that was a crazy stuff. Generally says there's also a lift for the lazy people. Yeah, it's like, you know, the walking up the steps like might actually, you know, do some good for your health and like help you lose some weight and get a little bit fit. And instead, people just, you know, try to cheat their way out of that. It's kind of crazy. Mighty Duke, I choose meat.com. Yeah, morons of the animal sacrificing cult. Yeah, pretty much. And that's what people want. They want to hear bad habit, you know, good news about their bad habits. And so they'll probably use that. Like I can imagine, you know, people like Frank Tufano or somebody like that, like probably using like information from there. That's kind of what these guys do. I think it's pretty crazy. Hey, Funface. If anybody's not subbed to her, definitely check her out. She's got a great channel. Then what? I forgot to mention. I found a guy who may want to debate. Be up for modding if I can set it up. Yeah, definitely. We'll. Yeah, Sverge fan. Yeah, we will like should have fun. Anyway, yeah, and we're gonna hopefully do some kind of collaboration for anybody who doesn't know. Check out the Fun Face. She's got a great channel here on YouTube, and she has sent me a article as well as Vohan. Shout out to Vohan too. He sent the article just before Ellie did. And there is this kind of crazy blog where the person who wrote it is trying to discredit like veganism and justify their meat eating habits by basically, you know, trying to distort the environmental impact kind of message and talk about how, you know, you need basically like manure and all this kind of stuff to grow your veggies. And it's just like a whole bunch of like fallacies and lies like all over. So that'll take quite a bit of time. I'm going to put together quite a bit of stuff, and I know Ellie's working to kind of get, you know, some other people working on it too. So we'll see what we can put together. That's right. Yeah, I don't know what the appeal is with Sverge. I just think like if anybody looks into it who isn't already biased, they're going to see that the guy is just completely crazy. But what happens, I think, is that with a lot of these people, they attract people who again want to hear good news about their bad habits. So it's like if you kind of like want to keep eating, you know, animal products, and you find this guy who basically tells you that, you know, it's actually the only way you can be healthy and that you'll be quite unhealthy if you don't eat those things. It's just this great way to make yourself feel better and like put aside any kind of like ethical qualms you may have about, you know, like eating animals. And so these same people who are pushing all the grass-fed, you know, meat and all this kind of stuff, and, you know, they think like, oh, well, I only buy my, you know, animals, my eggs, my dairy from these like, you know, humane farms. They don't want to see the kind of stuff that I just, you know, shared with you guys now. But these are not, none of these stories that I've shown are very, you know, rare or unique. If you just kind of like, you know, look through some of these things, you'll see that sadly there are cases of this happening like all the time. It's literally like every couple of days you see another case of farm abuse. There was just another one that I saw like a couple of days ago where there was a farmer who got videoed, you know, basically stamping on the head of a calf and like forcing a feeding tube down its throat and swearing at it and all this kind of stuff. And the industry was saying, don't be too quick to, you know, judge the guy. And it's like, well, you know, it's just crazy. There's just excuse after excuse being made, and yeah, it's very sad. Yeah, Ellie says, why are their anecdotes more valuable than opposing anecdotes and scientific consensus? They are the true feels over reals crowd. It's true. It's true. And, you know, I think with a lot of the people that are kind of like more dishonest, so I think like, you know, Carnival falls into this category, sadly. They don't want to actually see the studies. And when you actually want to show them anything, they just say, well, you know, your study is biased or you're biased or whatever. I'm always open to looking at anybody's studies. And I think that's kind of the only way you can really like get to it is read through and keep an open mind, and you'll see the truth. So, yeah. So, guys, hey, Race. Yeah, I don't think anybody really likes him, but yeah, I don't think I'll be debating him anymore. I was actually quite disappointed in one of his response videos after our last debate. I think he was just being very dishonest with some of the stuff he said, and tried to kind of like make out. So yeah, I don't think I'll be debating him. I like debating people when they're honest. Some of the earlier debates I had done, you know, even with like Logan when we debated Thomas Baden-Rees, that guy was like, I think he was pretty honest. Like he was genuine in his answers, and yeah, I didn't get that from Carnival. I mean, if somebody can't, you know, answer a simple question like, do you think, you know, beating a dog for no reason is okay, or torturing an animal to make it taste better? If you can't even just say like whether that's okay or not, I think it's a good sign that somebody's being dishonest. Yeah, Ellie, he had response videos after our debate. I would say go watch them, but don't. Like, let's not give the guy any more views than he already has. But if you're, you know, if you feel like you're in a sadistic kind of mood or whatever, like, yeah, I guess go watch it. Humane composting. Yeah. Well, my idea of humane composting is I throw my potato peels and my, you know, like carrot shavings and apple cores out in the back. So yeah. So I think, guys, that's all I had for today. I don't really have too much anything else right now. I've got a lot of stuff lined up. Really enjoying not being employed at the moment. So I think I'm going to have a lot more content for you guys. Want to do a lot more collaborations as well. And tons more stuff coming in the garden as well, and some food prep things. And I've got a recipe video hopefully coming up maybe tomorrow if I get enough time to put it together. So yeah, hopefully everybody enjoyed this. I might do this more regularly. Try to do more pertinent stories as they're happening. I kind of had saved up a bunch. Probably do shorter things like this and just focus on one or two stories. But yeah, hopefully you guys like this. Steph came in. Hey, Steph. You arrived when the party's ending. Well, maybe just watch it later, but and I'll put the links to the stories in a comment as well. So, hey, Leon, thanks for being on. Yeah, I really appreciate you guys being on. Hopefully everybody enjoyed this. And yeah, I'll do more live streams, I think, you know, now that I'm going to have hopefully more time. And I got a bunch of stuff planned that hopefully everybody enjoys. Thanks, Ellie. I'll look into that. I'm not familiar with that. Revolution of Thought 1. Okay, I'll look into it. Cool. All right. Good night, everybody, or good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are. And we'll see you guys soon. Bye.